So, as the IDF launches its ground offensive on Gaza City, forcing thousands of Palestinians to flee, a new report published yesterday by a UN Commission of Inquiry has found that Israel is committing genocide.
Being done with military equipment sold by British companies totalling at least £500 million. Last year, the government did suspend 30 arms export licences, while Israel's actions were reviewed for human rights violations. Hundreds still remain.
Well, Israel's foreign ministry has said it categorically rejects the report. It denounces it as distorted and false. But has Britain's stance on this to date been wrong? Well, the former Cabinet Minister Baroness Sayedivasi says that our government must suspend, all arms to Israel. But the former Attorney General, Sir Michael Ellis, does not believe that genocide was committed. So, Sir Michael, let's start with you. Let's cut straight to the chase. Why would a UN commission say that genocide had been committed? Why would they essentially mislead the world and falsely accuse Israel?
Because it's a biased report, Richard. It's not evidenced. It's not backed up by proof, by proper proof. It's actually propaganda dressed up with legal terminology. And if you actually look at the 72-page report, I mean, by the way, this is a report to the United Nations Human Rights Council. Human Rights Council, I put in inverted commas, members China, Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua. So that tells you something about the provenance of this report and its authorship. But what it also, if you look at the report, to prove genocide in international law, you have to prove intent. Throughout the 72 pages of this report, there's nothing mentioned about intent at all. They don't say that Israel intends a genocide, and that is required to prove it. But worse than that, Richard and Susanna, this is a report, actually, that takes Hamas's word as gospel. Everything Hamas says is taken as truth.
Well, the Commission has condemned Hamas in the past.
Well, this report takes Hamas's word as true. All of the casualty figures are said to be deliberate. It doesn't take into account any possibility of accident. It quantifies building damage as evidence of genocide.
Killing members of a group, causing them serious bodily and mental harm, deliberately inflicting conditions calculated to destroy the group, and preventing births. These are the four of the five conditions for genocide. Look,
you need evidence, and it doesn't bring evidence.
Well, was the Commission allowed into Gaza by Israel?
Well, it doesn't require access to Gaza in order to...
Well, I think the Commission would say they were not allowed in, Susanna, and therefore they weren't able to get evidence on the ground.
I've prosecuted people for 17 years before I came into politics. I prosecuted and defended people. You need evidence. If you're making allegations, it's very easy, especially... There's no shortage of haters of Israel.
Why won't Israel allow people into Gaza?
Well, Israel doesn't... I don't speak for Israel. I'm saying this report accepts Hamas's word. It doesn't refer to the fact that Hamas has 30,000 armed terrorists.
But isn't it difficult
it doesn't refer to the tunnels,
to find the evidence if you're not allowed access? I mean, I say that because I know that journalists, independent or journalists working for news organisations, are not allowed into Gaza either. So it's quite difficult for people to find the evidence, and therefore are reliant to a certain extent on what
I would say that
government
you have to look fairly at both sides. You can't just take Hamas's word. Hamas is a proscribed terrorist organisation.
But in essence, you're saying that the UN Commission is inherently biased because of its composition, and you seem to be saying that just to summarise this report, that it's a combination of malice and misinformation. That's your case.
Well, I'm saying that they have accepted Hamas's word.
The Commission has previously concluded that Hamas committed war crimes and other grave violations of international law. This is separately an investigation into whether Israel has committed genocide.
They don't even mention until well into the report Hamas, until about page 33 or something. Look, it ignores the fact that Hamas has taken human shields.
It seems they've done an investigation into Hamas. This is a separate report. Baroness Vasi, we are now, as a result of this Commission's report, potentially accused of complicity in genocide. Now, is the UK government going to take the position that actually we shouldn't take this report seriously either, or is it going to think we don't want to be complicit with a genocide?
I think there are two parts to this, Susanna. First of all, the latest independent UN Commission inquiry, which you've been speaking about, is the latest in a whole series of reports and high-profile interventions from people who are experts on genocide, who have called what is happening in Gaza a genocide. So
this is a commission which previously looked into what happened in Rwanda.
But well before that, we've had Amnesty International, we've had Human Rights Watch, we've had the Special Rapporteur, we've had incredibly renowned scholars, including actually scholars of the Holocaust, such as Amos Goldberg and Daniel Blattman, the International Association of Genocide Scholars, high-profile Israeli figures, ex-Israeli soldiers who have called this a genocide. And so this is the latest in a long list of international organisations and respected organisations who have called it
his accusation
genocide.
that the UN Commission, the UN in itself, is inherently biased against Israel. It is politically biased, and therefore we can expect reports to come out with these kinds of stringent and strident criticisms.
Yeah, there are three quite specific things about the independent commission inquiry, this particular report. First of all, this commission was set up long before the 7th of October. It was set up, I think, in 2021. What's interesting is that this is the fourth or the fifth report that the commission have now put out. They have previously put out, many years ago, reports on Hamas, including after the 7th of October, where they have categorically said that Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups have committed war crimes. And this report has taken 2 years in its preparation. It is deeply embedded in evidence. I disagree with Michael. If you look at the report and read the report, it goes to long lengths to explain intent, so not just the actions that have been committed, but the detailed evidence of intent. And what's really interesting about this particular genocide, and it's actually chaired by a lady who was on the tribunal for Rwanda and is in Rwanda genocide and is an advisor for what happened in Myanmar.
I don't think
genocide
with
there.
respect, I don't think that's a good point. If you look at the authors of this report and you Google history about this, look, can I just say, the report you mentioned last week about genocide, if you look at the so-called experts, anyone was able to email in and say they were an expert. Somebody put their name down as Adolf Hitler. I mean, that's the authority of last week's report. We're talking about this report. It's interesting that David Lammy's letter to Sarah Champion last week said that the UK didn't have evidence of genocide. If you remember the letter that came out last week that David Lammy had written when he was in the final stages of being Foreign Secretary, the UK didn't have evidence of genocide, and it still doesn't, not from this report.
So, Michael, can I ask, 65,000 people have died. A lot of people watching will think, how have 65,000 people
Well, those are Hamas figures.
been killed when everybody, every right-minded person condemns what happened back in October 2023 and understands that was an attack on Israel, motivated by wanting to destroy Israel.
Actually, by genocide.
And anti-Semitism. But how is it proportionate to have the level of death in Gaza that has resulted? Well, are you able to criticise the Israeli government for the way that they've prosecuted
the
war and also back Israel?
I criticise where criticism is fair. I'm not blindly, if you take a judicial approach, I've been Attorney General of this country, you have to look fairly at both sides. But the point is it consistent with genocide, Susanna, for Israel to be sending millions of leaflets and text messages and phone calls to try and warn people to get out of the way? If they really wanted to commit a genocide on the scale of Rwanda, on the scale of Srebrenica, on the scale of the Nazi Holocaust, would they send millions of leaflets, text messages and phone calls?
How would you answer that?
And would they send all the aid? 2.2 million tonnes of aid, that's 1 tonne per human being of aid.
We can sit here and we can try and have legal arguments about this, but I think anybody who has watched this genocide unfold hold in the palm of their hand on the phones that we see every single day, the devastation, the destruction, the children amputees, the people who have lived through absolute devastation of their lives, the starvation of a population, the targeting of civilians as they are evacuating along those humanitarian corridors, the closure of all fuel, food, electricity going into Gaza, the way in which we have seen child after child being targeted by snipers, the evidence from doctors who have come back and presented this before the Select Committee, the targeting of journalists, the live targeting of journalists. There is no doubt that there is overwhelming destruction and that the details of the Genocide Convention, which, by the way, is not just about the states not doing genocide, but actually preventing it and protecting those communities.
Well, we'll be asking the Minister of the Day, Liz Kendall, who's coming on at 8:30, what the government's position is on whether we should continue to send arms to Israel. Thank you both.
Thank you both very much indeed.